I've always intended using my new Transalp for what it was designed to do, road trips with the occasional gravel track thrown in. And I thought the quickest, easiest way to finish the run-in period was to take the bike on a 1,000-kilometre trip from my home in southern Portugal to the geopolitical oddity that is Gibraltar, a small piece of the UK located in southern Spain, much to the Spaniards' irritation given the length of the queues at border control. A lot of the route was motorway, which I didn't bother filming, but I did unexpectedly get to test the bike's off-road abilities to access my hotel on the first night, and this mountain road running down from Ronda to Gibraltar on day 2 was one of the most spectacular roads I've ever ridden. Full details of that coming later. Oh yes, and I learned quite a bit about the Transalp too. After a hearty breakfast, looking out over the Ronda Valley on day 2, I set off towards the mountains lying between me and the coast. I was close to the billionaire's favourite hangout, Marbella and Estepona, but my yacht's having its annual makeover at the moment, so I decided to head straight for Gibraltar, and I was rewarded with this fabulous mountain road. Now, whilst I was riding along, I was thinking to myself, wow, I can't wait to see the camera footage, and while it is good enough, I must admit to being slightly disappointed because it just doesn't capture the spectacular beauty of the mountains and valleys. I probably need to invest in a drone like Itchy Boots, but anyway, if you want to try this for yourself one day, it's the A369, and the best bit is between Ronda and the small town of Los Angeles. Let's talk a bit about the Transalp anyway, and why not begin with fuel? Always an important consideration when touring. Now, overall consumption was 4.4 litres per 100 kilometres. Now, I think that's pretty good, given that for much of the 1,000 kilometres I was sitting at 130 kilometres an hour on the motorway in fairly windy conditions with a brand new engine. But that's where the fuel fun stops. There's no range function on the display screen. They give you plenty of not very interesting information, like how many litres of fuel you've used that day, battery voltage, or how hot the engine coolant is, as if you can do anything about that, but there's nothing to tell you how much further you can ride before you have to refuel, other than, of course, the fuel gauge itself, which is wild. There are 6 bricks in all, and the first brick stays on for what seems like hours. You can see here, this is when I arrived back home, I still had all 6 bricks on, despite having filled up in Spain 140 kilometres back. But once the first brick finally does go, the others fall like dominoes. Every 25 kilometres or so, another one falls, as a reminder you're getting closer to being stranded by the side of the road. Then, when you do stop, filling is made a bit awkward because of this inner baffle thing, which means that to avoid spraying fuel everywhere, you have to fill the lower part of the tank and then half withdraw the nozzle, never a pleasant feeling, to fill the top half. Never seen that before, don't know what its purpose is, other than probably as a baffle to stop the fuel sloshing around too much. And finally, whilst we're on the topic of fuel, I did notice that riding around town for the first few kilometres in standard mode on a relatively chilly morning, the fueling was ever so slightly jerky until the engine warmed up, and in sport mode, even when the engine is warm, it can on occasion hesitate very slightly before picking up. It's not bad, but it's noticeable, although I do think it's common to many Euro 5 fuel management systems nowadays. Okay, fuel moan over, let's talk about the positives. Now, regular viewers of the channel might remember that I used to own a 2019 CB500X, and while the two bikes are similar in many ways, the Transalp definitely feels more grown up, more substantial. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's a mile muncher in the same category as, say, a BMW 1250 RT or a Honda Goldwing, or even the BMW 1250 GS, but it was more than up to the job of taking me to Gibraltar. Now, I know that many potential buyers cite the absence of cruise control as a deal breaker, but it honestly doesn't bother me that much. Yes, of course, it would have been nice to have on the motorway sections, but I survived. As one subscriber put it in the comments, if you want cruise, take the car and then you'll also have air conditioning and music. Cruising at 120, 130 kilometers an hour is effortless, and acceleration up to about 155 for overtaking is not a problem. I'm not saying the Transalp can't go any faster, it's just that to do that, you would have to put your mind to it, concentrate and put some effort into going faster. So the Transalp hasn't got the relentless grunt of 180 horsepower plus super naked, but we knew that anyway, didn't we? The compliant suspension is a godsend on these longer trips, and I can confirm my initial impressions that, at least for me, the seat is no less comfortable than on any other bike I've ridden. Yes, after a couple of hours I was looking forward to taking a break, but you have to do that anyway to refuel, and after 10 minutes walking about at the service station, my buttocks were factory fresh again. Another huge positive for me is the heat from the engine, or rather the lack of it. I haven't been able to feel any at all, even at low speed around town, which is quite an accomplishment and important for me in the Algarve, where summer temperatures can be ferocious. Now, this is one of the reasons I discounted the Tiger 900 early on in my research, because Triumph engineers inexplicably saw fit to duct the hot air from the radiator directly onto the rider's knees. No, seriously, there are videos about this problem on YouTube, so you need to watch out for that. Honda has managed to make the Transalp both a great handling road bike on twisty roads like this, where the front wheel feels like a 19-inch and a relatively narrow rear wheel provides swift turn-in, and a very stable motorway cruiser where the 21-inch front soaks up any uneven surfaces and guarantees extra stability. Wind protection is good from such a small screen. This is the standard version, but my dealer fitted the optional deflectors for delivery, so I don't have a direct point of comparison. Head and torso are well protected, but the forearms and shoulders pretty much get the full blast. As you can see, I also borrowed the top deflector from my ADV for the trip, and that made a difference too. I still had wind hitting the very top of my helmet though, so I may well ask them to fit the optional touring screen at the first service, if only so I can put the upper deflector back on the scooter. Another admittedly small detail that I appreciated on the trip was this bit of exposed frame. Sounds obvious, and I know a lot of bikes have something similar, but it does mean I could easily chain the bike to a tree or a post in a hotel car park overnight for additional security and peace of mind. You've asked about whether the quick shifter is worth the money. Yes, absolutely is the answer. I used it a lot on this trip and I was very glad I had it. Upshifts are seamless, downshifts usually seamless. You do have to get the engine loading just right, otherwise the changes can be a little bit brutal, even on the soft setting that I have mine set to. Honda actually offered the shifter free on all Transalps ordered in Spain and Portugal during the first week after the official launch, which was great as it was about the only accessory I would have paid for anyway. My dealer also gave me €400 worth of accessories, which accounts for things like this radiator guard, which, if I'm honest, I probably wouldn't have bothered with. If I'd had to pay for it myself, I'd probably have gone for an aftermarket option later on. I'm in discussions with various suppliers at the moment for things like rear panniers, hand guards, engine crush bars, etc., but these won't be available for a few weeks, so I'll just have to be patient. I don't do that much off-road, so I'm not desperate for extra bodywork protection, and I quite enjoy the feeling of riding a naked Transalp unencumbered by heavy accessories. I believe SW Motec are going to send me a set of crash bars and other bits and pieces when they're ready in a few weeks, so I'll give them a try. Other things I like, well, the standard luggage rack is very useful to attach my tailbag to and as a grab handle when pushing the bike around. There's enough space under the seat for a few knickknacks. The front foot pegs are very comfortable. The mirrors don't vibrate at all. And then there's the intangible stuff like the peace of mind that comes with a dealer network that's so dense you're never more than a few hundred meters from one, and the fact that the Transalp is likely to be a very popular bike, and so there should be plenty of aftermarket support. Annoyances? Well, apart from those I've already mentioned, no, not many really. Well, not yet anyway. The lean angle with the kickstand down can be alarmingly acute if you stop on even a very slight incline, and the brakes are only good, not amazing, just good, so I'll try and improve the bike with some sintered pads. So, am I happy overall with my purchase? Well, yes, it's exactly the bike I was expecting and wanted. I rode 350 kilometers on day one and then had to ride the last kilometer of this track to get to the hotel. It wasn't planned. I didn't know access was going to be like this when I booked, and it wasn't that rough, as you can see, but I remember thinking that I wouldn't have been able to do it on my Speed Twin with its race-ready tyres and low ground clearance. As I've said before, the Transalp is an SUV. It's not a hardcore off-road 4x4. There are other bikes for that, like the Tenere or the Touareg or even the new Suzuki 800DE that I'm hoping to be able to test in a couple of weeks. But they're not as good on motorways and they don't have anywhere near the same number of dealers. The Transalp hits the sweet spot between a 500X that's too buzzy and underpowered on the motorway and an Africa Twin that's too big and too expensive. The Transalp is premium enough for long trips like this, but not so expensive that I'd be precious about where I parked it or keeping it clean. The bike's sitting in my garage right now, covered in dead insect and rain spatter after the trips, but it doesn't bother me. I'll give it a quick wash next time I'm out. And when it comes down to it, the negatives like the lack of a fuel range display or cruise control are a bit first world problems, aren't they? I really enjoyed my trip down to Gibraltar, and it's something I wouldn't have attempted on, say, my 2019 500X or 2022 Speed Twin, and for that reason alone, the Transalp deserves credit. I also happen to think it's a good looking bike, especially in this tricolour livery. Okay, it's no Panigale V4, but for an adventure bike, it's not bad. Final thought, it was confirmed yesterday that the Transalp will indeed be coming to North America this autumn as a 2024 model, but don't expect any modifications. I doubt very much Honda will be adding cruise and tubeless just months after initial launch, but you never know, I suppose. Anyway, that's it for this video. My next trip will probably be up in the mountains of northern Portugal, so stick around for that. Let me know in the comments if you think I made the right choice of bike for the kind of riding I do. And as always, thanks for watching.